Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report. I'm your host, Melina Weisskopf, filling in for Steve Lance. Political spending is shattering records again for this year's elections. The top donor so far is Democrat billionaire George Soros. Soros has donated at least $126 million to his Political Action Committee, Democracy PAC. The PAC dispersed about $15 million alone on this election cycle. The next two biggest donors are Republicans, Richard Uihlein and Kenneth Griffin. They each donated around $67 million. Open Secrets, a nonprofit group that tracks political spending, estimates that total political spending in the midterms would reach $16.7 billion by Election Day. The previous record, $14 billion in 2018. But this increase is almost entirely explained by inflation. Tech workers in the country are bracing for a round of massive layoffs. Just this week alone, a handful of companies announced upcoming layoffs and hiring freezes.
Hiring typically trends around how financially robust a company is and how they're feeling financially.
Lyft says it would lay off roughly 13% of its staff, and Amazon says it'll pause corporate hiring for the next several months. And big changes coming to Twitter after Elon Musk takes over. Mass layoffs began today with reports saying up to 50% of employees could be laid off. But the overall job market is still trending well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics report today. The U.S. economy added around 260,000 jobs in October. Now, this was higher than projected forecasts, but the same report also showed the U.S. unemployment rate rose to 3.7%. Does this new data from the Labor Department indicate a resilient economy? We're happy to bring on a chief economist at ZipRecruit, Julia Polak, to discuss. All right, Julia, thank you for sparing the time to chat with me today about the current economic state. I want to know, what is your take on the current labor market? We know the Biden administration keeps touting it as strong, but some are saying the worst is yet to come. What's your current assessment?
So the future outlook is very uncertain, but for now, the labor market remains very, very strong. Job gains are about 60% larger than they were before the pandemic, and the economy is adding good jobs across a wider set of industries as well.
And some market experts are saying that unemployment will start to pick up following the Federal Reserve's 75 basis point rate hike. Some Democrats are even asking the Chairman Powell, how many job cuts should Americans be preparing for? Do you think they have a valid concern here, or are they, just kind of hoping or looking at the worst case scenario?
For now, it's clear that the labor market is slowing down, but it's slowing down very, very, very gradually. At this current rate, it'll be about 15 more months before the labor market gets back to pre-COVID, very warm conditions from the current sort of overheated conditions. That said, the labor market can turn quickly. We know that when conditions deteriorate, when businesses start to worry, they can lay off workers quickly. The most important thing to watch is the demand picture. Is consumer demand for most goods and services still strong, or is it deteriorating? It's deteriorated, of course, in the housing market, but elsewhere, it's holding steady for now.
I want to get into politics a little bit. We're right here at the midterms. Republicans are really capitalizing on the economic downturn that we've seen. Democrats, of course, say that this is just the effect of, just a natural side effect of the pandemic lockdowns, and that we're experiencing this not only in the U.S. but across the globe. How much of this would you say is due to the pandemic versus how much of it is due to the Biden administration's policies, or Republicans would argue excessive government spending? What is your take on this?
Well, it does appear that much of the inflation that we're seeing is the result of not only supply chain issues that were predominantly the cause at the beginning, but also a large amount of government spending. Both administrations spent a lot to get us out of this pandemic crisis. They decided to err on the side of spending too much rather than too little and risking the jobless recovery that we saw after the Great Recession. The downside of that has been inflation, and it does appear that we're sort of exporting that problem around the globe. rising interest rates are also exporting financial instability to other countries. And so, yes, there is great uncertainty. These are grave problems. We're not really seeing anybody come up with very creative policy solutions to them. Right now, the main solution on the table to bridge the gap between demand and supply is to destroy demand by letting the Fed, raise interest rates and hurt economic conditions and possibly hurt the job market in the process. Politicians are coming up with very little else on either side of the aisle.
What would you suggest, having been in the financial arena for a while? You said that there's not many creative solutions being put forward on the table right now. What do you think some of those solutions should be that they should be discussing?
Well, now's a good time to talk about reducing deficit spending. That also sort of has a tightening effect on the labor market, but it can be more targeted than monetary tightening. It's also a time to think about taking the constraints off this economy. So there's so much more housing demand than supply, and instead of destroying demand and reducing household formation, how about let's do a really thorough rethink of all of the policies that are reducing the supply of housing and preventing us from building new homes that people so desperately need. Now's the time for creative policy solutions.
Okay, thank you, Julia, for your insights. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care.
And President Biden today touts the latest jobs report. That's as big names of both parties enter the final sprint to Election Day. Here's NTD's Iris Tao with more.
With Friday kicking off the final weekend sprint to Election Day, President Biden is stumping in California and touting his legislative wins.
I worked so darn hard to write and pass the CHIPS and Science Act to turn things around. But we also know folks are still struggling with inflation. It's our #1 priority. That's why, with Mike's help and Scott's help, I signed the Inflation Reduction Act.
He's campaigning with Congressman Mike Levin of San Diego, where a Democratic-leaning House seat is increasingly under threat.
And I want to ask Congressman Mike Levin, thank him for welcoming me to his district today.
And the appearance comes amid a partisan spar over a Friday jobs report, released just 4 days before the midterms. Biden touts the over 260,000 jobs added in October, while Republicans highlight an uptick in the unemployment rate, calling it the worst jobs report of the year. That's as big names of both parties enter a final stretch of campaigns. Biden will be rallying in Illinois tonight, and so will Vice President Kamala Harris on Sunday. Top House Republican Kevin McCarthy is also in Illinois today, campaigning with a Republican congressional candidate. Meanwhile, former President Trump is stumping for Republicans in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio in the next 3 days. And that's after he on Thursday hinted at running again.
I will very, very, very probably do it again, okay? Very, very, very probably.
And on Saturday, Biden and former President Obama will rally together in Philadelphia. The two will campaign for gubernatorial candidate Josh Shapiro and perhaps more importantly for Senate candidate John Fetterman. According to a poll released Thursday, Republican Senate candidate Mehmet Oz has surpassed Fetterman for the first time after their highly watched debate last week. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And the Department of Homeland Security is ramping up safety efforts for the midterm elections. This follows last week's warning from federal officials about the potential for violence. The DHS has been pushing out warnings to state and local law enforcement authorities. Officers across the country are on the lookout for threats to election officials and vandalism of ballot boxes. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said that one of the greatest terrorism-related threats to the U.S. is homegrown. However, Homeland Security officials have not identified any specific threats. Lighter mornings and darker evenings are on the way as daylight savings time comes to an end this weekend. At 2 a.m. Sunday, U.S. clocks will turn back 1 hour and revert to standard time, shifting sunrise and sunset an hour earlier, and ushering in 4+ months of darker winter evenings. It comes as lawmakers debate whether the practice should be eliminated. The Senate approved the bipartisan Sunshine Protection Act in March, which would make daylight savings time permanent, but the bill has stalled in the House.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.